Hello, let's go over Module 4's landscape homework assignment. So, this homework assignment will give you the opportunity to explore the nature of outdoor natural light. You will notice angles, intensity, direction, the quality, and the color of the light. You are required to photograph the same location. And I'd like for this to be a landscape genre photography assignment. So, thinking about that and planning that is going to be important because you're going to need to go back to this particular location 3 different times over either one day or a period of a few days. And you're basically going to be experimenting with your white balance and also learning a little bit about the time of day, the Kelvin temperature, and how the light really changes throughout the time of day. I'd like for you to consider your composition for this homework project. And you might want to think about the rule of thirds. So this link takes you to a video where an interesting fellow talks about the rule of thirds. And this link takes you to a website talking about symmetry, which is another compositional style that you might want to think about for this project, where you've really balanced the full frame. So if you cut it in half, it's like the two sides would mirror each other. So I just want you to think about different ways of using composition for this homework project. And those are the 2 compositional styles that I'm recommending. So since you're going to be making the same photo kind of over and over again, as I'll talk about in just a second, I really want you to think about having some sort of composition that you find really inspiring. It's okay if you don't have a tripod, and it's okay if your composition isn't exactly the same, but do the best you can. Definitely go to the same location, stand in the same place to take this series of photos. There's 2 parts of this homework project, so right now I'm going over part 1. I encourage you to really take your time when you're thinking about your location and the composition, and I want the location to be safe and convenient for you. So because you will be needing to go back early in the morning, well, you'll start off by doing something early in the morning and then around noon, and then finally going back towards the end of the day, either right before or right after sunset. Or you could even take pictures, that's a pretty quick transition, especially this time of year. So you could be somewhere for about 20 minutes or so and watch the sunset and take these pictures and see what the best results you get. You might even want to think about having more than one location just in case your first location doesn't work out. Remember, in the Bay Area, we get a lot of fog. And so this could have an impact. This project is really going to benefit you the most by hopefully recording these images on a sunny day. So basically what you're going to be doing, I've kind of shown you an example here. But you're going, and this example is more photos than what you're going to be submitting. I'm just kind of giving you information, almost more information than what you'll be submitting, but you'll be taking this many photos and maybe more. So you're basically doing a series of photos in the morning, right before around sunset, midday between 11 and 3, and then also in the evening, which is called magic hour. And that's going to be right before or after the sunset. So here I'm showing you some students' examples of this project. Basically, you're going to show up to your spot. You're going to figure out what the best composition is. And then you're going to first set I've got some, let me skip around a little bit here, sorry. First, you're going to make your first exposure using auto white balance. And then you're going to make at least 3 more exposures exploring the different presets. And you might want to learn how to set your custom white balance. So this takes you to a page that talks about manipulating the white balance. And there's also a page in this learning unit that talks about setting your custom white balance. Remember, these instructions are kind of a generic for any type of digital camera, but you should probably do some research online to make sure working with your specific camera. And here's just a short video that goes over again, like the most common ways of setting your custom white balance. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's how you would need to set your custom white balance. So let's go back to the homework page. Excuse me. So like I said before, your first exposure will be set in auto, and then you're going to make 3 more exposures using one of the white balance settings that's called your presets. And you could also try to do your custom white balance at this time as well. So what I've created here is kind of a grid that shows you all these 3 photos were made around sunrise, definitely before 8 a.m. I mean, I think this photo was definitely made right before the sun came up. And the first shot is set to white balance daylight. The second shot is set to shade. And the third shot is set to tungsten. So these are the presets, and how different, just by simply changing your white balance settings, you can kind of really create a different type of mood or visual representation of the scene in front of you. So that's the early morning light. And you can also see just how different the reflections are, because you have a different quality of light that's a little bit more directional, as opposed to midday, which the light is going to be predominantly directly above or thereabouts. It might not be coming quite so much from the side. And then the different white balance. So this is auto, which oftentimes can really give you a pretty flat looking photo. Daylight, and then the student used fluorescent, which gives you this kind of creative purpley color. And then finally in the evening, right before, after the sunset, we have 3 more pictures of the same scene, set to auto, 1 to tungsten, and then they use their Kelvin temperature, which is something that some of your digital cameras might have. And if you downloaded an app for your phone, you could also play around with these concepts. I'm not going to get into, if you are using a phone, do the best you can to be playful with the color. You should still see a difference by noticing the time of day. So you should still get something out of this assignment, but it might not be exactly the same. Again, depending upon what kind of camera phone you have, and if you download any software. So be sure to make sure your exposures are correct. Your in-camera light meter might change a little bit, because as you change the presets, that does have a slight effect on your exposure, so just be careful with that. You should be making notes when you take your pictures, because you're going to want to be able to tell myself and your classmates these white balance settings, and if you don't make a log of it, it might be hard for some of you to find that information later in your digital file. So the easiest way would just have a piece of paper, write down the file number or the exposure number, and then the white balance that you're using. So the required modes, I'd like for you to use your manual mode, because I want you to be setting your own f-stop and shutter speed. I'd like for you to shoot in JPEG. I don't want you to do this assignment in RAW. If you shoot these photos in RAW, they won't hold the white balance information in the file. You'll see it on your LCD screen, but it won't hold the color capture information. Use the best ISO for the lighting situation. So in your evening photos, you might need a higher ISO. And then if you do need a tripod for the evening photos, you might want to use that as well. Or you might want to use a tripod for all of them. That's your choice. No flash, available light only. And then when you turn your work in, you're going to want to label your images with the white balance, the exposure, and then tell us if you're using a cell phone or a camera. I'd like for you to respond to these following prompts, which are basically just letting us know, you're basically turning in 3 photos. The best one from your morning exposure, so this was the daylight exposure that the student liked. The one that you liked, or just comparing, that's fine as well. So the midday photo, the student turned in, it was set to auto. And then the evening photo, the white balance was set to shade. So you can see a lot of different components to these photographs, not only the color, but the quality of light. So this assignment gives you the opportunity to really think about lighting, and then again, like this great tool that you have in your camera, white balance. So be sure to turn your work in and tell us what white balance you have it set to and your exposure information. So that's all stuff that you're going to want to record in your notepad or however you're taking notes. So the first part of your assignment, you're turning in the 3 best photos out of all the photos you make, one representing the lighting and the white balance in the morning, one representing the lighting and the white balance at midday, and one representing the lighting and white balance in the evening. So that's the first part of and responding to these prompts. The second part of your photo is to take these concepts and apply them creatively. And so now that you understand how to change your white balance and you've kind of considered the quality of light at different times of the day, I want you to try and play around with this in a creative manner. I'd still like for you to focus on the genre of landscape photography. And you're going to submit 2 photos where you're controlling the white balance. You're going to want to label your photos with the white balance, the time of day, and your exposure information if you're using a cell phone or a digital camera. And I'd like for you to reflect on what you gained from working creatively with the time of day and the white balance. So when you submit your work, it should look something like this. It would be great if you wanted to put it in a box. It's not that difficult to do when you're submitting your homework projects. Let me just scroll up here. Sorry about that. Oops, nope. I'll show you that in a different video. It's really easy if you do want to do it that way, because it might be more simple. Anyways, TOD stands for time of day, so this was shot at 9 p.m. These are some examples of students' work. They used the Kelvin temperature set to about 2800. Their exposure was about ISO 100 at f16, 3 minutes. And you can kind of see how there's almost like a monochromatic tonal quality due to the time of day, which would be the Kelvin temperature, the quality of light, and then the white balance setting. And the exposure might have an impact on that as well. And then this other beautiful landscape shot, I think this might have been up in Tahoe. You can see that this is right before the sunrise. The auto white balance is tungsten, and the exposure was about 400 at 5.6 at a 60th of a second. And then finally, you're going to need to respond to 2 of your classmates' posts with a minimum of 75 words. And I've included some prompts here for you to think about in your response to your classmates' posts. Be sure to use the terms and the language that were covered in this week's learning unit. And think about, share your thoughts on the time of day and how that affects the photo. Like every time we look at a photo, sometimes it creates some sort of a personal narrative. Like for example, with this photo, I just get a really calm feeling. It makes me feel a little bit cold. I want to put on a warm jacket with a hat and go for a walk on this pier. For some reason, this photo makes me think about wanting to spend some time with myself. This photo, on the other hand, of course, makes me think about the New Bay Bridge and how beautiful it is and the Bay Area. And the narrative might be very different. A lot of you are interested in music. You could talk about how the images might inspire you to think of a particular song. But I definitely want you to consider these prompts when you're responding to your classmates' posts. So I know it's a lot of work. I hope that by the end of this learning unit, you'll feel much more confident understanding exposure, time of day, and white balance. So if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email via Canvas. Thank you so much for your time.